Jordan Peterson used to be one of the most articulate, respected, and influential academics in the online space. While he always had his detractors, he possessed a hardcore fan base who looked up to him as sort of a father figure. Nowadays, it seems Jordan Peterson's fan base has imploded on itself, with him barely clinging on to his last bit of online respect. He's constantly being clowned for clips like this.
So do you believe in the all-knowing, all-powerful, all-good notion of God?
What do you mean by believe?
People have accused him of being divisive, a pseudo-intellectual, and a fence-sitter, while others say he doesn't actually believe anything he's saying. He has an increasing community of detractors that seem to get louder and louder with each new viral clip of him. Today, we're going to try and get to the bottom of what the hell happened here. How did we go from this?
Get yourself together for Christ's sake so that when your father dies, you're not whining away in a corner and you can help plan the funeral. And you can stand up solidly so that people can rely on you. Don't be a damn victim. Of course you're a victim. Put yourself together.
To this.
Up yours, woke moralists. We'll see who cancels who.
But first, I want to explain why this topic hits close to home with me. I'm 17 years old in high school. In my first period history class, my teacher would do this thing called banter, where anyone in class could bring up topics they wanted to discuss for the first 15 minutes of class. So somebody mentions a professor at the University of Toronto. Apparently, this guy won't use anybody's preferred pronouns, a girl in my class said. I couldn't believe it. So after this, I went to do a bit of research on this hateful professor. But what I found out was this girl wasn't exactly telling the whole truth. She was talking about Jordan Peterson, who was protesting a bill in Canada, Bill C-16, which, according to him, would criminalize misgendering people, which to me was insane. Now, despite him kind of misrepresenting the bill and what it said, which I didn't realize at the time, I saw this guy as fighting for free speech. And I think a lot of other people saw it the same way. This was Jordan Peterson's first cultural lightning rod moment, something that shifted public attention to him. He appealed to kids like myself. I was an edgy, counterculture teenage boy on the verge of adulthood who went to a liberal arts high school and was constantly lectured about privilege and whiteness and patriarchy. When I hear about this Jordan Peterson guy, it seems like his advice is made for me. I start watching his lectures, I listen to his podcasts, I even read his book. I would dare to say I looked up to Jordan Peterson at the time, and I certainly wasn't alone. There was a whole group of young men like myself who looked up to Jordan Peterson at the time. I'm sure some of you are watching this right now. Maybe you were in your teens or early 20s, probably played too many video games, maybe had a few other bad habits ranging from corn to weed. A message like Peterson's absolutely resonated with you more than somebody talking about white male privilege or toxic masculinity. Peterson's message was about personal responsibility, why it's important to chase meaning over happiness, and the importance of free speech. When you put these ideas in a vacuum, not only are they pretty good, but they appeal to young men who feel lost in an adult world that they've just entered. Peterson was also able to take complex ideas regarding psychology and philosophy and break them down into a digestible format so people could understand them better, which to me is the sign of a good educator. This made Peterson wildly popular amongst young men, allowing him to explode in the online space. Fortunately, or unfortunately for Peterson, depending on how you look at it, he blew up at a time when SJW-owned compilations were all over YouTube. If you want to feel old, by the way, some of these videos are from 10 years ago. Feminists destroyed by facts and logic. These would do insanely well, numbers-wise, but they didn't really have intellectual depth to them. It just so happened that Peterson ended up on a couple of these, probably the most famous of which was when he debated Kathy Newman, where Jordan Peterson calmly dismantled her on TV for an audience of over 50 million people on YouTube alone as of time of writing. It's still arguably his most famous interview to date and was his second cultural lightning rod. This was in every wrecked feminist compilation of 2016, alongside figures like Ben Shapiro and Steven Crowder. Despite them being very different from each other, people associated them as guys who owned the libs, even though that's not really what made Jordan Peterson so compelling. He was certainly more intellectual than Steven Crowder, but it didn't matter, he was put in the same box. People like Crowder, Shapiro, and Milo were outwardly and proudly conservative, unlike Peterson, who declared himself neutral on politics. Now, figures in the conservative media space at the time were making generational wealth, covering topics that people knew Jordan Peterson from, like feminism. So this left him with two options: go back to his professor job, leave all this behind, or do what these guys were doing and make millions of dollars. Having a clinical practice is cool and all that, but would you rather have that or life-changing money, not to mention hundreds of thousands of adoring fans around the world. So Peterson made the decision to go from a college professor's salary to a college donor's salary. This was the time when it was cool to speak out against institutions, academia, the government, the police, whatever it may be. Lucky for Peterson, he got famous for speaking out against the Canadian government and the University of Toronto, so it fit perfectly. He started hanging out with more right-wing podcasters, which is fine in and of itself. We can do what we want. There's nothing inherently wrong with that. But the problem people had was Peterson kept calling himself a neutral figure when he clearly wasn't. Politics also doesn't happen to be Jordan Peterson's specialty. He was definitely more of a psychologist. I mean, he was literally trained in that. And it was around this time he attracted a ton of new fans just by mere exposure. But at the same time, this came with a lot of new detractors. Typically, politics is a bad thing to dip your toes into if you can't handle it. Trust me, as a random guy with a YouTube channel, that's the last thing I want to do. Typically, unless you make political content, it's not wise to get into politics for no reason. Unfortunately for Jordan Peterson, that's where most of the money and exposure was. Despite him claiming to be politically neutral or classically liberal or however he wants to define it, he was given most of his exposure after these viral moments via podcasts and social media. He made appearances on huge podcasts and integrated himself to a group of online intellectuals. Peterson joined what was now known as the intellectual dark web, which is about as lame as it sounds, including JP, Brett and Eric Weinstein, Ben Shapiro, and a few others. It was all these people who claimed to be truth seekers when most of them were just Elon Musk simps who were addicted to Twitter. Peterson absolutely included. This was kind of the beginning of the end. Things would start to trend downwards really quick. Now, there's a saying I absolutely love, and I think it's something to live life by. I see better than I hear, aka actions speak louder than words. If you heard Jordan Peterson speak, especially on his philosophy for life, you'd think he was the last guy to be addicted to Twitter, right? Surely a man with a PhD, former professor, psychiatrist, deep thinker wouldn't stoop to the same level as a guy with an anime profile picture on Twitter. But you'd be wrong to assume that, because Jordan Peterson would melt down on Twitter non-stop. Because he had such a growing community of detractors through his association via politics, people would tweet stuff at him and he would respond basically every single time. He'd frequently make posts about how platforms like Twitter would enable anonymous troll demons, yes, this is a real term he used, that would ravage society, aka some dude shit posting on Twitter is the downfall of the West. It seemed the more active Peterson was on Twitter, the more maybe unstable is the right word he seemed, not just on Twitter but also in interviews, like breaking down into tears over very odd things. Now, I've spoke about two cultural lightning rod moments for Peterson, both of which have been very positive for his career. This next one would not be that. It all started when he replied to the now Elliot page about her transitioning, saying, "Remember when pride was a sin and Ellen Page just had her breasts removed by a criminal physician?" This landed him a suspension from a pre-Elon extremely left-wing Twitter. Shocker. And regardless of how you feel about what's being discussed in this tweet, it's really strange to me. Like, why do you care, bro? Why does this affect you at all? And trust me, somebody whose childhood crush was Ellen Page in Juno can have an opinion on this, like myself, but not you, pal. Most people would say this and say, "Oh shoot, I got banned from Twitter. That sucks." But not for Peterson, because at the time he was fully addicted to Twitter. It seemed like he would spend all day just on Twitter. So after he was banned, he took to Instagram and made one of the most painfully cringe videos I've ever seen in my entire life. And I will play you some clips right here, but I'm warning you, it is super cringy.
I say banned, although technically I have been suspended. But the suspension will not be lifted unless I delete the hateful tweet in question, and I would rather die than do that. And I'm not taking down that tweet or acknowledging that my tweet violated the Twitter rules. Up yours, woke moralists. We'll see who cancels who.
Jordan Peterson stood, or sat, head held high, and produced a 15-minute speech about his Twitter ban. If you wanted to write a parody of Jordan Peterson, you couldn't have done much better than this. He claimed he would rather die than take the post down. Bro, it's a tweet. Who fucking cares? Nobody is asking you to stake your life on a tweet that probably took you 10 seconds to write. This isn't the dark ages, brother. Now, there's a lot of waffling in this video, and as I've said, it's pretty hard to watch. It feels like a grown man throwing a temper tantrum because he got banned from Twitter. Maybe that's what it feels like, because that's exactly what it is. And when this happened, I remember thinking, this was my GOAT? I used to look up to this guy. And of course, as you might know, he ended the video with one of the corniest, dumbest, and cringeworthy quotes of all time.
Up yours, woke moralists. We'll see who cancels who.
Regardless of if you think this ban was justified or not, this is probably the worst thing you could do from a public reputation standpoint as a public figure. I can't think of a worse way to handle this situation, but in a weird way, this might have been a good thing. People knew Peterson was addicted to Twitter and it was bad, but they didn't know the extent until he was unbanned after this. So maybe him being unable to access Twitter would have been the best thing for him. After he did a podcast with Netanyahu, which was an all-star softball performance, by the way, he naturally got some blowback. Actually, reading the comments, it's hard to find one that's positive. People were trolling a bit, but they were providing real criticism and feedback. But instead of ignoring this or taking some of the criticism and trying to improve, he started replying to all these anonymous troll demons. Peterson had a real issue with anonymity, people making posts without their real name, which for a guy who has spoken out so much against government overreach and the importance of freedom, it's odd that he thinks people shouldn't have the ability to post anonymously online, calling people cowards for wanting to keep themselves anonymous. He despises these faceless people with 5 followers, but at the same time gives them his massive platform by replying to them with stuff as trivial as name calling them rats, even if these guys are being assholes. Why bother responding? Like, don't you have better stuff to do? Now, Jordan Peterson has had some anonymous troll demons do some pretty awful things to him, likely because he's such a public figure. But have you ever considered that you also have a ton of information out there? It's because your data is exposed, meaning anyone from your landlord, your employer, or scammers can access it. You know how like every company is having data breaches? There's a reason that these are really, really bad. Criminals and potential stalkers now know your name, phone number, and address. And what's even spookier for my American viewers, health insurance companies could actually raise your rates based on your online activity. You know what stops this though? Today's sponsor, Incogni. Incogni has a custom removal process. So not only does it remove your data from hundreds of data brokers through automated removals, they go a step further. Now they can scrub your data from websites exposing your personal information, such as news portals, sports publications, health apps, and others. And this is exactly what it looks like. I literally recorded this right after I created my account, and look how many takedown requests I got right away. And if you're watching this, Incogni will give you a 60% discount if you go to incogni.com/ghostgum or use the code GHOSTGUM at checkout. Basically, if people can't find you online, they can't harm you. That's what Incogni does. It protects you from unnecessary online harm. And as somebody who has had their identity somewhat private from YouTube, Incogni is a massive tool for me and I strongly recommend it. So use code GHOSTGUM at Incogni or go to incogni.com/GHOSTGUM for a 60% discount. Link is also in the description. It got so bad that his daughter was asking for him to have his Twitter time restricted. She was genuinely concerned about her dad, but don't get it twisted, Michaela is no saint. She got into some trouble when she advocated for more censorship and content moderation on Twitter, which is crazy because her and Jordan have been crusaders against censorship for years.
People who use the hashtag filth or rats when referring to an entire nation of people should be censored.
People reacted appropriately, calling her out for her hypocrisy, and she would retract her statements after talking to her dad. So is she resolved, I guess? Well, she didn't retract it. She just said she didn't want to see certain content on Twitter and it shouldn't be pushed towards her. Michaela also allegedly left her husband and child to sleep with Andrew Tate. If you want to hear that story, I have a members only video on this channel explaining that whole situation. Meanwhile, through all of this and her own drama, Jordan was still calling people rats. Yes, these were just random Twitter nobodies. Now, all this kind of coincides with the time Peterson got his own show on the Daily Wire, which for most of his hardcore fans was the beginning of the end. Unlike before when Peterson was independent, he could still be politically neutral. Even if he wasn't saying neutral things, he could always claim neutrality because he was fully working on his own. He was his own boss. Now, he was directly being funded by billionaires via a company owned by Ben Shapiro. It was hard to deny his political leanings at this point. So his centrist and apolitical fans started turning against him. The only people left after the Daily Wire acquisition were his hardcore fans, and the people that were left were obviously pretty conservative because the Daily Wire is extremely conservative. So due to his new detractors, his Twitter meltdowns intensified more. It was around this time that Peterson went full-on Christian fundamentalist. Now, I'm not exactly 100% sure why, but my best guess is that it was a way to justify the things he said whilst pandering to his remaining fans. After many public meltdowns, most people who followed him for philosophy or life advice didn't take him seriously anymore. Now he could use Christian theology to back up his takes and find a new audience, which ironically would lead him to losing the remainder of his audience. Now, if you'll remember from my Lex Friedman video, you'll know there's one thing that people hate more than conservatives or liberals. It's someone pretending to be something that they're not. This is a point I really want to hammer home. There's no one more hated than frauds and grifters. Up until this point, you could argue that no matter how dumb or cringe it was, Peterson said what he really believed. At this point, that was the only thing he really had going for him. But once he started arguing Christian theology, claiming to be a Christian, this shattered. He's promoted Christian values, or Judeo-Christian values, while riding the fence about being a Christian, more specifically a Catholic. This means unconditional support for Israel, by the way.
The fate of the world depends on the decisions of the people of Israel.
Classic Christian value. Upon learning of Israel's intentions to bomb Gaza, Peterson told his buddy Netanyahu via Twitter to give him hell. I'm sure the Pope would agree with this. Oh wait. The problem is, Jordan Peterson positioned himself as an extremely passionate Christian man, but at the same time, he'd get into a pattern of denying he's actually Christian. Usually he'd just avoid the question or talk around it, so nobody really knew if he was a Christian or not. But Alex O'Connor nailed him when he asked him a question about his faith, where Peterson gave an answer that, by definition, would make him a Christian, but he won't admit that.
I went back in time with a Panasonic video camera and put that camera in front of the tomb of Joseph of Arimathea. Would the little LCD screen show a man walk out of that tomb?
I would suspect yes.
So that to me seems like a belief in the historical event of the resurrection, or at least of Jesus leaving the tomb, which means that when somebody says, do you believe that Jesus rose from the dead? It doesn't seem clear to me why you're not able to just say, it would seem to me yes.
Now, these interviews of him kind of making a fool of himself weren't extremely popular, but the people who saw them found them odd. Then, for some reason, JP decided to do the dumbest thing possible and go on Jubilee to debate Christianity to atheists. As you may have seen or can guess, this interview was a train wreck. This video was initially labeled 1 Christian versus 20 atheists. Presumably, someone from Jubilee actually watched the video and realized, wait, that's not accurate, let's change the title. And I think this video sums up why people, regardless of belief, can't stand Peterson, because the video is an absolute disaster. There's so much to go over, and there's 2 things that really stood out for me. First, this guy. Now, this guy is being an inflammatory asshole.
You say that. I haven't claimed that.
Oh, what is this? Is this Christians versus atheists?
I don't know.
You don't know where you are right now.
Don't be a smartass.
Well,
and I mean
either you're a Christian or you're not.
I won't talk to you if you're a smartass.
Oh, either you're a Christian or you're not. Which one is it?
I could be either of them, but I don't have to tell you.
You don't have to tell me. I was under the impression I was invited to talk to a Christian. Am I not talking to a Christian? I think everyone should look at the title of the YouTube channel. You're probably in the wrong YouTube video.
You're really quite something, you are.
Aren't I? But you're really quite nothing. Right, you're not a Christian.
Okay, I'm done with him.
But he's kind of right. What are Peterson's beliefs? Why did he come on this show if he's not going to tell people his beliefs? It seems like at times he doesn't even know. Peterson won't even say he's an atheist. He treats religion like it's a myth, whilst also acting like it's true, which if that's true, he's either a really bad Christian or a really bad atheist. Because if you are a Christian, you don't believe these things are myths. These are historical events that happen. religion. If you see them as just myths or false, you are an atheist. It's pretty black and white. Perhaps Peterson would describe himself as culturally Christian and theistically atheist, which I can't believe I have to stress this. That's fine. Just admit it. Don't give people this runaround about not actually saying what you believe. Just say, hey, I'm an atheist, or hey, I'm a Christian, or alternatively, don't say anything. Why are you even in this video? Now, in research for making this video, watching a lot of Jordan Peterson, I think I know what he's getting at here. There's a hierarchy of preferences, in which case the base of something is your highest preference, your absolute fundamental value. This is what Peterson calls God. So when he says everyone believes in God, they just don't know it, he's saying that everyone has a fundamental value, which I guess makes sense. I still have some problems with that, but if that is true and I'm getting that right, why not just explain that to people? Maybe define that off the bat so we know how we're defining things. Don't expect people to watch all your lectures and know everything about you. Peterson has this horrible habit, which this guy, much more respectfully and polite than the last guy, pointed out.
I think your point is irrelevant to the way that people tend to use these words. Your point that there are these polysemous
I didn't make that
God.
point. You did.
I
made a specific point that God was associated with conscience.
I just feel like you kind of retreat into this semantic fog.
I think semantic fog is the perfect way to describe Jordan Peterson. He feels either lazy or avoidant. Is he avoiding the question, or he doesn't feel like answering it? No Christian would say, oh, well, it depends on how you define Christian and God and R, and they wouldn't say any of that. They would just say, yes, I am a Christian. Or if they're an atheist, they would say, yes, I am an atheist. Or if they're somewhere in between, they're agnostic. It comes across as lazy, not wanting to commit to a position because you might not be able to argue it. It's muddying the waters to make them seem deep. Because of all of this, people started to realize something. This whole Christian thing that Peterson had been going on about for years at this point was a grift. You can see Christians in his comment section, on Reddit, on Twitter, everywhere, talking about how bad this really was. People who are actual Christians, not Jordan Peterson, well, it depends what you mean by define Christians, were pissed off at this because not only did it paint them in a bad light, but he misrepresented their arguments. He was pretending to be a Christian when he's not. And like I said, there's nothing that people hate more than that. Ironically, all these years, critics of Peterson have tried to portray him as a grumpy, dismissive, and bitter towards the world old man. Now, if you said this 5-10 years ago, I would have called you delusional. Nowadays, I would fully agree with it. Just look at the way he behaves. It's honestly embarrassing. I've never seen somebody use more words to say less. Here, he responds to hypothetical questions, intentionally missing the point.
In like Nazi Germany, and it is the case that there's like Jewish people in your attic and you're trying to protect them, example. Would you lie to like the Nazis?
I would have done everything I bloody well could so I wouldn't be in that situation to begin with. It's a hypothetical and it's not answerable. Hypotheticals?
It's like you asking me, what would you do if you woke up in the Sahara Desert? And my response was, well, I'd never put myself in that situation where I was near there, so it's a stupid question. The question is meant as a thought exercise, and I think Peterson is smart enough to know that. It's incredibly frustrating because not only does it come across as closed-minded, it seems lazy. You're a philosopher, psychologist, and you're unwilling to even engage with one philosophical challenge. How about you replace you with another person? For a guy who hates postmodernism with a burning passion, he sure likes to make the most basic concepts extremely abstract to the point where he's saying a load of nothing. There are so many examples I could go through, but I'll spare you. Ask yourself this question. If this version of Jordan Peterson was the first one people were exposed to, would he be that famous? I reckon probably not, because I've seen basically nobody defending him here. So we've established how Jordan Peterson is now and how he's changed, but we still don't really know why he's changed. Because I think everyone would agree he has to some extent. I mean, look at him recently on Piers Morgan. The guy is a mess. By the way, in this clip, I'm not sure who he's talking about, but it's not the billionaires that funded his show who are getting richer and richer while accumulating more and more power. There's just so many examples, and it's like, how did we get here? Well, I can point to a few things that I believe, but I want more opinions on this because I genuinely don't know. So give me your opinions in the comments because I'm really curious here. I have 3 reasons to explain this shift in Peterson. Now, number 1, this one I don't see people talking about a lot. Jordan Peterson had a very bad benzo addiction. The story is pretty sad sad, but I don't think it's that far-fetched. When Jordan Peterson's wife was diagnosed with cancer, he developed an addiction to benzodiazepines, which, for those of you who don't know, is one of the most difficult things to get clean from. It's one of the only substances where you can actually die from the withdrawal. Instead of opting for treatment in Canada or the US, he went to Russia for an experimental treatment, where he allegedly was put into a medically induced coma and detoxed. The procedure, according to Peterson himself, was either unknown or regarded as too dangerous in North America. This was done by his daughter's request, who had a Russian husband at the time that made it happen. Just a little side note, she had a baby with this guy and then subsequently cheated on him with known sex trafficker and Andrew Tate. Anyway, you could say it was the benzos or the procedure. Regardless, it could be affecting his behavior now, which, if true, is incredibly sad. Benzo withdrawal is no joke. It's something I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy. It might explain these emotional outbursts by Peterson. Another possibility is a bit more straightforward: money. Jordan Peterson went from a relative unknown academic to selling out world tours in just over a year. He didn't do this by talking about interpretations of Jungian psychology. He did it by using self-help speak. That's what people came to him for. Sort of pop psychology, if you will. Combine this with him declaring war on neo-Marxist woke postmodernists or whatever would attract him a very large conservative fan base, which led to a lot of money being thrown at him by right-wing outlets like the Daily Wire. It also led to a shitload of blowback on the things he said, as is going to happen if you talk about politics, regardless of what side you're on. From being a well-respected academic to being despised by a lot of people, regardless of if it's justified or not, must be difficult. I don't think money really changes that, but it is possible. Which brings me to my last reason for Peterson's change: his social media addiction. This might pair with the last one, but hear me out. As I've shown, Jordan Peterson is addicted to social media. I know it's his job, kind of, but he spends so much time on there, like way more than necessary. Responding to randoms on Twitter is not good for business. In fact, I'd argue it's not only bad for business, but it's bad for your mental health. Anyone with a brain knows it's not healthy. For the average person who's not a big figure like Peterson, social media overconsumption is an easy way to make yourself miserable. Now try that, but add in thousands of people critiquing you, getting angry at you, or being downright nasty. Imagine what that does to someone. Also, now imagine you have no impulse control and can't just log off. Alternatively, which could be the most likely option, it's a combination of these three things I mentioned. Jordan dug so deep into this public figure lifestyle that he couldn't go back to being a professor. And now look where he is. Old, bitter, has to go to bed knowing his daughter slept with Andrew Tate. Oof. In conclusion, I will always hold some respect for Jordan Peterson regarding his takes on psychology and him getting me interested in psychology and philosophy. However, I just can't stand to hear him speak anymore, especially when he's talking about the woke mind virus or waffling about some topic, making it 10 times harder to understand.
What that person on your tape has is a medical disorder.
He's an intellectual who stepped out of his expertise, therefore opening himself up to an insane level of backlash. It seems liberals, conservatives, centrists, atheists, Christians all have issues with him for different reasons that all come back to the same point. He's a man who says a lot whilst saying nothing. I said something at the beginning of this video that I'm not sure if you caught. I think the sign of a good educator is the ability to break down complex things and make them digestible. Now, if you flip that, the sign of a bad educator is to take simple things and overcomplicate them. I'm sure if you guys had shitty teachers in school or good teachers in school, you know what I mean. On this channel, we talk about a lot of people where it's kind of cathartic, admittedly, to revel in their downfall. And honestly, I thought this video would be the same. But as I'm writing it and recording it and presenting it to you now, I don't feel cathartic. I feel sad, especially in a world now where men are lacking serious role models. Jordan Peterson could have been that guy, better than half the retards we have now. I still think his core teachings of taking responsibility, looking after your family, and improving yourself a little bit every day are good things for young men to strive for. It's just, this doesn't seem to be important to Peterson anymore. What's more important is intellectual muscle flexing and dumbass gotcha sound bites on debates. Talking about how the real reason people can't afford houses, birth rates are going down, and everyone is depressed is not because of the massive wealth transfer from the middle and lower class to the ultra wealthy, because that would paint the people who fund his stuff in a bad light. He claims instead of that, which I think is pretty obvious, and this is a quote, it's 60 years of radically demoralizing, quasi-feminist, dimwit, hedonistic leftist propaganda. Do you see what I mean when I said saying a lot to say nothing? His old lectures are still engaging, his book still holds up pretty well in my opinion, even his old podcast appearances are great, and honestly, making this video is difficult because I can't stand to hear this guy talk anymore. He's a shell of what he used to be, and as corny as it is, I really believe that new Jordan Peterson could benefit from the advice of old Jordan Peterson. So that leaves me here. My question when making this video was, have I changed or has Jordan Peterson changed? The answer, probably both, and maybe you guys can relate to that, but either way, it's been depressing to watch this guy spiral. So on that note, if you want to see me get angry at someone, check out this video on screen about Lex Friedman, I guess. Thanks for watching, guys.